Seen him at the Goodman, you've seen him at the Writers Theater, you've seen him on Broadway, and now you get to see him at Louder Than a Mom. Please welcome Mark Grapey.
I think it is important to have had at least one hero in your life, and I think there's a small window of time when one can reasonably have a hero. You have to be old enough to let your hero influence you in any kind of meaningful way, yet not so old that it's embarrassing to still have a hero. I personally think that that window is from age 12 to 21. That's it. Those are the parameters. And I got in just under the wire. Show me a hero and I'll write you a tragedy. It's F. Scott Fitzgerald. And I suppose our first heroes are our parents. My family was my father's second, and he was in his mid-40s when I was born, and he always seemed impossibly old to me. He was never in great health, and he owned a store that sold women's clothing. So, not exactly hero material for a young boy. None of my teachers growing up were heroes, not even close. I liked a lot of the sports stars of the day, but their utter lack of proximity coupled with my athletic ineptitude conspired against their ultimate elevation. When I was at Carnegie Mellon, I had an acting teacher who really inspired me, but it took a movie star to become my hero. When I was 20 years old, and that's under the wire, by the way, I got a job working in the box office of the Steppenwolf Theater Company, and a month later I became John Malkovich's assistant director on a play called Coyote Ugly. And you know, timing is everything in the world of hero worship, and not just for the worshiper, but you know, for the worshipee. You know, is the pot-bellied Michael Jordan anyone's hero now? Bill Cosby, OJ? So you have to keep in mind that this is the 1985 John Malkovich. You know, before all the bad movies, before he became a French-speaking fashion designer who toured the world in an opera portraying a serial killer. That's true, by the way. No, this was the True West John Malkovich, the Death of a Salesman John Malkovich, the Killing Fields John Malkovich, the Oscar nominee for his first movie ever. Anyway, rehearsals start, and I'll admit it, I'm smitten. I'm in awe. And I'm in the room. It's like 6 of us. It's Fran Guine, and it's Glenn Headley, it's Laurie Metcalf. It's like I'm the young Henry Hill in Goodfellas. I can barely see over the hood, and I'm parking Cadillacs. And people were around all the time competing for his time, you know, for John's time and his attention. And I thought, well, how am I going to get noticed here and get my time with John and, you know, forge what I saw as our collaboration on this project? And it's late in the very first day, and the stage manager calls a break, and John says he's going to go outside for a cigarette. And I watched as he headed out all by himself, alone for the first time all day, and just as he got to the front door, I blurted out, "Me too." And then there we were. It's just the two of us. I'm 20 years old, and it's just the two of us, and I'm in front of that little theater in Halstead, and I turn to John Malkovich and I say, "Can I bum a smoke? I left mine in my car." And the only problems with this statement was I didn't have a car and I didn't smoke. So John proceeds to hand me one of his cigarettes, which is, of course, the movie star Camel Unfiltered. Did I mention I didn't smoke? And the only thing that kept me from choking and throwing up and possibly fainting was the sheer terror I experienced at the next thing out of his mouth, which was, "I may need you to drive me back to my hotel later." So I figure I have until the next equity break to learn how to smoke and to somehow get my car stolen. Well, there was no ride that day, but there was a slow progression of me becoming John Malkovich. Now, for a movie metaphor, this is not so much being John Malkovich as it is single white female. You know, at first I just start to talk a little like John, and amongst my friends my conversation becomes sprinkled with little sayings like, "Oh, that's really interesting." Or I go, that's interesting. And then around tech, I started to dress like John. Sort of a lot of layers and scarves and vintage pieces, you know, which he would get at Ultimo, but that I would buy at Ambets next door to the theater. But the piece de resistance were the Chinese slippers. See, Malkovich wore these little Chinese slippers. So I went all the way to Chinatown without a car to get some little Chinese slippers. And you have to understand that this time in the world there were 2,000,000,002 people in the world who wore Chinese slippers. 2 billion people in China, John Malkovich, and me. Now I wouldn't wear them at Steppenwolf, you know, I wasn't that crazy. But later when I would show up at the bar with my friends and they'd see me and they go, you know, you're just wearing those because Malkovich wears those. And with a total straight face I'd say, hey, I've been wearing little Chinese slippers for years. And sometime after the show had opened and John was back in Hollywood or New York or London or wherever and I was left to be the only Malkovich in town, I asked out this really terrific girl. This is way out of my league, but with my new persona and the confidence that came with it, I kind of felt up to the challenge. And she said yes, this terrific girl, and so I got all set to take her out for the first time. Now, so I had my new way of speaking, you know, that sort of quiet, lispy thing that I would just sort of talk like sometimes. And I had the outfits and the scarves, and now it's February, and for that weather, you really can't beat little Chinese slippers. Just, you know, there's a lot of warmth and traction in those smooth plastic soles. But what I had finally added to my repertoire, and I haven't told you about, was the walk. See, the walk really kind of completed my transformation, and I had started to do it when I really felt the need to impress someone. And it's sort of this ambling, ethereal, kind of slightly pigeon-toed gait that I had perfected, and it kind of looks like this. It's kind of like this. It's like... So you kind of like walk like that and look into space. So it's the big night and it's my first date with this girl, and I come around the corner and she's standing in front of the restaurant, and I go into my Malkovich walk. And you know, it's got this pace that you can't rush, so she watches me approach, and about a minute later I get to her. And she says, this really terrific girl, this knockout, she says, "Why are you walking like that?" And I say my standard answer whenever I get, you know, anything called out for anything Malkovich, I say my standard answer, which is I go, "What? This is my walk. This is how I walk." And she said, "Oh, I just thought maybe you'd shit your pants."